everyone. Welcome to A Moment with Melissa. This is professional development in 10 minutes or less. It used to be 5 minutes or less, but I found out that nothing amazing can be done in 5 minutes or less. So I've increased it to 10 minutes or less. I promise I will never go over 10 minutes. Today we're talking about the pitfalls of punishment. So, first, let's talk about what punishment is. The definition for punishment is a consequence that decreases the probability of a behavior occurring again. So, the goal of punishment is to decrease bad behavior by implementing something unpleasant or taking away something pleasant in order to decrease the probability of someone engaging in that behavior again. We've all used punishment at some point in our lives, and I'm sure that we have each felt the effects of punishment in our lives as well. So there are two types of punishment. There is negative punishment and positive punishment. Negative punishment is removing something pleasant to decrease behavior. So think about timeouts, where we're removing the student from something fun that they like to do in order to decrease behavior. The same thing as loss of recess, denying access to a toy or a favorite activity that they like to do. It might be ignoring or not speaking to a particular student, or it might be loss of privileges. Those are all examples of negative punishment, removing something pleasant in order to decrease behavior. The other type of punishment is positive punishment. In positive punishment, we are adding something unpleasant to the environment in order to decrease behavior. Some examples of that might be extra homework. It could be a reprimand. It could be more work being required before reinforcement is provided. Why do people use punishment? Well, people use punishment because it typically has a rather immediate effect. And because of that immediate effect, the student, the child, the adult immediately stops engaging in that aberrant behavior. Because of that immediate effect, the person who is doing the punishing is reinforced. It makes their life better, so they are more likely to engage in punishment in the future. Some people might engage in punishment for retaliation. I hear a lot when I go into classrooms that a student did some sort of aberrant behavior, and so there must be some sort of consequence or retaliation that must happen for this student because they engaged in this unpleasant behavior. People also use punishment because they believe it will deter people from engaging in behavior again. And for that, I have a question for you. How many of you have ever received a speeding ticket? And have you gone over the speed limit again? I bet you have. It really did not deter you from engaging in the behavior of going over the speed limit. The use of punishment leads to many different consequences. The top one is loss of social currency. And what that means is that if you have a student in a classroom who is consistently being punished by a teacher or an administrator, what happens is that they lose what we call social currency. And often they will be seen as the bad kid, not just by the teachers in the administration, but also by the other students in the classroom as well. What could happen from then is that that student will start to live up to their expectations. Another thing that punishment could lead to is an aversion of people who implement punishment. And also in the green bubble, escape and avoidance behaviors. So think of students who are punished a lot in school, who might get a lot of detentions, or they might get extra homework assigned to them, or maybe the teachers have them write their names on the board every time they call out from class. What eventually happens is these students don't want to go to school. If it's a particular teacher, they don't want to enter that classroom. Students start to dislike and try to stay away from people who are implementing the punishment. The use of punishment also leads to a decrease in behavior, but only in the presence of the punisher. Let's think back to my speeding example. I know all of you that have received a speeding ticket, you have continued to go over the speed limit at times. I can virtually guarantee it. However, what happens when you see a police car along the side of the road? The presence of that punisher is going to cause you to decrease your speed to the speed limit. It's not because you were punished with that speeding ticket that you are going to stop speeding. It is the presence of the punisher, also known as the police officer, that is going to cause you to decrease your speed. It's the same thing with behavior. For some of our students, the use of punishment may lead to anxiety or fear. It could even lead to anger and rebellion. If you are only using punishment, it will also probably lead to an increase in other behaviors of which you may or may not approve. If you start to decrease one behavior, your student is going to start to engage in another behavior that serves the same purpose. Without teaching the student what to do, punishment can lead to all sorts of behaviors that you probably are not going to be too fond of. Remember this quote by Jane Nelson: "Even though punishment and shame may stop behavior for the moment, the long-term results are usually negative. Remember how you felt and what you wanted to do after someone inflicted blame, shame, or pain on you." Some of you may need to think back to your elementary or high school days. Some of you might even be thinking of a boss and something that happened to you last week. But we have all experienced punishment, and we've all had bad experiences with it. Let's move away from just the short-term effects of punishment, and let's move towards actually teaching our students and strengthening our connections together so that they don't have the same experiences that you and I have had. Sadly, the use of punishment does not lead to an increase in desired behaviors. This is because we aren't teaching our students what to do. We're only teaching them what not to do, or we're teaching them how to be really sneaky and get away with something that they shouldn't be doing. The use of punishment does not lead to an increase in positive relationships. In fact, it does quite the opposite. What it does is push students away from us and makes them not want to confide in us and interact with us. The use of punishment does not lead to generalization of positive behaviors. For instance, you and I have learned not to speed when we see a police car. However, we will speed whenever we don't see a police car. Finally, the use of punishment does not lead to learning, except for maybe how to avoid punishment. That's the only type of learning that is going to occur if you are relying on punishment to change behavior. Too often, we forget that discipline really means to teach, not punish. A disciple is a student, not a recipient of behavioral consequences. That's a quote by Daniel J. Siegel. So let's talk about how we can teach our students. Because if a student doesn't know how to read, what do? We teach them. If a student doesn't know how to write, we teach them. Sadly, though, in most of the settings that I've been in, if a student doesn't know how to behave, we punish them. Why is that? Shouldn't we teach them? Isn't that what we do in all other cases? We figure out where the skill deficit is, and we teach our students what to do. and we teach them through the use of reinforcement. Reinforcement is the only way to teach new behaviors. Positive reinforcement changes behavior for the better, while criticism, and I'm going to add punishment, stabilizes negative behaviors and blocks change. You are not going to see any positive change when you solely rely on the use of punishment. And positive reinforcement is the most powerful teaching tool that we have. Check out A Moment with Melissa's series on reinforcement. It's going to be a 4-part series. We're going to start out with what is reinforcement, then what affects reinforcement, the principles of reinforcement, and finally, how to use reinforcement. For now, I hope you learned why punishment alone is not going to change your students' behavior, and I hope that you're excited to tune back in for my upcoming series on reinforcement. Thank you.